All right. I know we have some people that are going to start joining. Hello, 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 everyone. I know we're at the top of the hour, so why don't we jump right in? Thank you for joining us today. My name is Susanna Ramos. I am a marketer who comes with about 20 years of experience, the last decade or so of which has been focused on marketing operations. For my daytime gig, I serve as the Director of Managed Marketing Services here at Coffee and Done. But before I tell you a little bit about our organization, for those of you who are not as familiar, I'm going to turn it over to the experts that we have for today. So Thomas, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Susanna. Hello, everybody. I see a few familiar names. Thanks for joining us. I am the Managing Director at Coffee and Done. It's a pleasure to have you join us today. Real quick commercial on Coffee and Done for any that aren't familiar with us. We focus on assisting our clients in driving growth through the alignment of marketing, sales, and service, and doing that to create a revenue generation engine. And really, our success lies in the ability to bring together not just technology, but strategy, operations, resources, basically deliver a full holistic program that ensures that the technology supports the business outcomes. So we'll talk more about that in this session, but let me pass it over to Tim.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Tim Manders here. I'm the Senior Data Analyst at Coffee and Done. And today we're going to be talking about value measurement frameworks, what they are, how they work. And then I will be showing some samples, some examples of what these types of value measurement dashboards could look like. Show you kind of a few different options or variations that you might see out in the wild so that you can think about how you're going to best fit your value measurement framework for your business.
That's absolutely right, Tim. So as Tim mentioned, we're going to talk a lot about how to translate a lot of what we're going to talk about for the actual framework into some of the technology. So in this case, we'll be leveraging some of the Microsoft technology. But before we do any of that, we're going to talk to you a little bit about what a value measurement framework actually is, so how we define it, how folks are doing it today, and how to look at it a little differently. So where to start, the types of metrics that you want to consider, and the different dimensions really that you want to look at when it comes to developing the right value measurement framework. So let's start from the top. And Thomas, I'm going to pitch this first question over to you. How do we define a value measurement framework?
Well, that's a great question. So we define it as a structured approach that organizations use to measure both the tangible and intangible value of their initiatives, their products, their services, the use of assets. The primary purpose really for a value measurement framework is to move beyond sort of subjective evaluations, gut feel, those sorts of things, to really have a framework that aligns resources, it aligns investments, it aligns people, it aligns strategies so that the business can achieve specific goals and that everyone within the organization is pulling the rope the same way. So that's really how we look at it, and we'll talk more about that as we go forward here.
Awesome. Nice and succinct. Now, I want to talk a little bit about current state before we get into what good looks like. So, Thomas, I know we mentioned as part of our kind of our overview on Coffee and Done, I feel like we've seen it all. And so that means differing levels of maturity. That means some are nearing the finish line when it comes to developing the right framework, and some of them are just starting. I want to focus a little bit more on the latter here and talk about what we typically see as maybe a typical or maybe foundational approach when it comes to measurement, and not just focused on things like output. Obviously, we want to focus more on things like outcomes. So talk to us a little bit about what the typical approach is that we often see for folks who are starting this journey.
Yeah, great question. So as you can imagine, there's a wide variety of levels of maturity in organizations. Some, frankly, don't do any measurement. It's pretty much gut feel and kind of hope for the best. But we do see organizations that do measure things. If they don't have a robust program, they might be looking at activities things like the effort of the team, the impressions of a social post, the email opens, things like that, but they're not necessarily looking at the outcomes. And so outcomes are really what our goal is, aligning individual outcomes with organizational outcomes. So, if you're not doing that, you might be, doing individual measures, individual silos within departments. Maybe they're not aligned. That's some of the gaps that we typically see when folks don't have a holistic value measurement framework.
It's like the dreaded S word, silos.
Silos, yes.
And
Lots of
those silos, when we're thinking about that, that's not just, sales versus marketing, right? You've got a whole other layer here to think about, because the fact is the work doesn't stop when the sale is closed, right? So you have your client success, your other operational teams to think about. But it sounds like, if I'm hearing you correctly, Thomas, we're really just seeing a lot of maybe singular focus. So whether that is me as a marketer or my team as a marketing organization, but not necessarily seeing a lot of maybe holistic overview when it comes to the way that we're thinking about marketing performance. And that's a challenge, right? Because when we think about how marketing kind of articulates their value, we're not thinking about, opens and clicks, right? We're thinking a little more holistically than that.
Yeah, I think, and you kind of touched on one of the, I'd say, fairly common challenges is what's the definition of a lead, right? You got marketing out there generating lots of leads, and sales looking at those leads saying those aren't qualified, those aren't good leads. So what you have is sort of two different KPIs. One's a volume orientation, one's more of a quality orientation. The reality is they need to meet in the middle and have a kind of a common view of what a qualified lead looks like. And that transcends across the organization. When you get into things like customer service, the quality of interactions with customers are going to define whether they become repeat customers, whether they're going to churn on you. So, I think what we'll see as we go through this is sort of the alignment across different dimensions of the business, and making sure that, again, not just measuring, but measuring the right things that break down those silos and ensure that everybody's, again, on the same page as they move forward.
It's funny that you mentioned kind of that alignment and the importance of it. And I know we're going to dive a little deeper into that, so I don't want to jump ahead, but I remember a client that we had many years ago, and we had started with the marketing organization and really focusing on how we can, like I said, kind of maybe articulate their value to the greater organization. And I remember us being in a room with that VP of sales, and he was like, I just need more qualified leads. That's it. It's real simple. I just need more qualified leads. And our response was, okay, great. So how do you define a qualified lead? And I think we were all surprised in the room at how hard that was for him to answer. So it just underscores the need for that alignment at the very beginning, because it sounds like it really dictates a lot of how that framework gets shaped from that point on.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, and even preceding a value measurement framework is really, frankly, defining the organizational strategy, right? So understanding what your ideal customer profile looks like, understanding what buyer journeys look like, understanding the elements that make up successful outcomes for the company. Then you can apply the value measurement framework on top of that, so that all the KPIs are aligned against that strategy and against those processes, leveraging the technology. Now, we also, I think part of the question here is so why haven't they done that, or why do companies struggle here?
Yeah.
Some of that has to do with, investment. It's, frankly, making sure that the systems are available, the investments there to capture the data, to be able to manipulate and move the data, measure the data, and bring it into dashboards. So we'll show a little bit of that, Tim will later. But it's also things like executive buy-in and know-how. Does the leadership team buy into the value of measurement? And then if they do they have the know-how to actually put it in place? And so, again, we'll talk about some of those things as we move through the session here.
Yeah, there's a Gartner study on that, actually. I think when and I think the study was more around kind of change management, and so I think it certainly applies to something like CE modernization. But I think it was like 62% of the survey, those who were surveyed, said that this was like the most critical factor in successfully kind of navigating that change, was having that leadership, not just buy-in, but support. Like that's really critical.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right.
So when we've kind of talked a little bit about what current state looks like today, what we often see is kind of this singular focus or almost maybe myopic approach, and why they aren't necessarily doing it differently. What's the kind of case for change here, right? So like, what's the point of them doing it? What are they missing out on when they don't take a maybe more holistic or maybe more enterprise focused view when it comes to measuring performance?
You mean when they wing it?
You said it. Okay, you
Yeah,
said it, not me.
that's pretty much what we see is, unfortunately, it's a lot of gut feel, indecision, or, maybe just a lack of confidence in decision making, being able to feel good about using the data to truly drive the next move, whether that's, to accelerate an investment or to pull back. Having data that supports that is really critical to building the company's confidence. The other thing is agility. If you're setting up these measures correctly and timely, then you're able to make quick actions or make quick decisions, rather than having to wait for a month or a quarter or even a year to pass before you change a program or change a strategic intent. So what we want to do, and again, we'll talk about this as we move forward about the timing of measures and how to use those at different levels within the organization.
Tim, that's got to be music to your ears to make data-driven decisions, because I think it's got to be pretty hard to develop a proper dashboard or be able to leverage the technology and map the right data if you're hoping on a wing and a prayer.
We're not quite to the point where AI can make all these decisions for you and you don't have to do anything. So,
oh man, it took us what, 10 minutes to talk about AI for the first time?
Between now and then, there's a lot to do.
Yeah.
That's right.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, well, look, again, we've talked a little bit about like how we define value measurement. Obviously, we know the importance. It does feel like a little bit of no-brainer, but why that is hard for us to kind of make that change. I want to talk a little bit about what good should look like, right? So how should organizations be approaching this instead? So as a marketer, as part of a marketing organization, as part of a greater go-to-market approach, how do we really think about developing the right value measurement framework? So Thomas, I know you've got a few slides. I want to go ahead and maybe get into those and talk a little bit about some of those dimensions.
So these are some of the critical elements that go into developing and measuring value. We'll expand this as we go forward, but right from the top is alignment. We're going to use that word a lot. Alignment across several dimensions within the organization, but fundamentally, it's looking at the KPIs that define success. So we talked about activity metrics, and certainly activity metrics are important, but only as they relate to outcomes. And so establishing an outcome framework that the activity is tied to, so that we can say that by aligning those or performing those activities and measuring that, we know those will lead to the specific outcomes we've established. The other thing is balancing short and long term. So as I mentioned before, we want metrics that allow individuals to make quick decisions if they need to pivot on a particular campaign or a particular account, but also have those build over time into defined trends. So we can see that certain activities are performing well over months or quarters or even years. And so again, it's establishing a framework that has these different dimensions on it. The next thing we do is sort of wire the organization. Essentially what we're trying to do is ensure that both individual contributors, and team leaders and leadership are aligned on what the goals are, and that each has the relevant measures available to them to see how the organization is performing. So, we want to engage a team of cross-functional agents that go across the different functional disciplines in the company, but also at different levels within the company, so that they're supportive of this overall framework. And again, they can see the connections between their individual performance and the organization's performance. The last component really is to modernize the tool set. And so, we'll talk about Dynamics and Power BI a little bit later, but fundamentally, we want to have is a system that allows us to capture the data we need to make those data-driven decisions, make that happen efficiently. And we did mention AI that's coming now at frankly a rapid pace. But what you find is that many clients aren't ready for AI, and part of it's because they don't have the infrastructure in place. They don't have the data in place that they need to allow AI to do what it does best. So what we want to do is get the organization ready, get the processes and strategies ready, but then have the technology platform that allows us to capture and use the data that we've got. And so, again, a lot of this is putting all those dimensions together into this value measurement framework.
Hmm.
Now, the dimensions that I think are most critical here, we kind of break it into these three: the function, the role, and the time frame. So let's start with function. Function really is the customer life cycle. Now we're focused here on sort of marketing through sales and customer service, that full customer life cycle that drives, the initial prospect to become a converted customer, to become a repeat customer, and then a loyal customer and an advocate. So contributors within the organization, people that sit in the marketing chair or in a sales chair or in a customer service chair, all have metrics that they need to measure, but those all need to work together to ensure that that customer experience is consistent across that life cycle. Similarly, the roles are, individual, department level, leadership level. And so there's a role up here where the individual contributes to a team and the team or line of business contributes to the overall enterprise. And so what we want to do is make sure that as you structure this value measurement framework, it captures each of those levels and they either roll up or cascade down, from the top to the bottom. And then the third dimension here is time frame. And so it's important that you can have measures that are both timely, but also can be captured in longitudinally over time, so that you're able to look at trends and improvements, or if there's challenges, be able to take action to improve those. And so we want to dig into each of these dimensions as we go forward. One quick example here, as you see, is, for instance, as a sales leader. So their role may be to manage a team of salespeople who are looking to drive opportunity conversions. They want to have a kind of a monthly pipeline metric. They want to see, is the pipeline growing? The pipeline feeds the conversion rate, and ultimately the conversion rate feeds the revenue. So what they're trying to do is kind of make sure that their part of the equation is covered and measured effectively.
I do appreciate, Thomas, that when, if we're looking at the function area here, we haven't just put, instead of lead gen and op conversion and expansion or retention, we're not putting marketing, sales, CS, right? In part because you're really sharing responsibilities throughout the entire life cycle. So while a function can be primarily focused on a given role, it doesn't necessarily mean that either the work that they're doing or that the measurement against that work is solely affected by that single role or title, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think our experience is that today, the buying journey has changed. It's gotten, in some cases, longer. It's certainly gotten more complicated. Maybe there's more stakeholders involved
Yeah.
in the buying process. And what that means then is that the journey may not be linear, and probably isn't. And so the idea that marketing just generates leads and throws them over a wall is a bit antiquated. And so what we're seeing is more of a shared responsibility, and all the more reason why, the silos need to be broken down, and there's alignment across metrics, across processes, across success and outcome.
100%.
So if we look at that from a kind of the role perspective, here's some examples of sort of, top down, the enterprise, starting on the left, the enterprise metrics. Most organizations, your senior leadership cares about things like market share or revenue, right? The top line is the company growing? Is it growing customer base? Certainly, there's an efficiency idea of improving margins. How can we make sure that we're building the business and not necessarily adding proportional headcount? Can we be more efficient? Can we drive better margins? Can we price better with better positioning, competitive positioning, and then reducing the SG&A? And so there's always a goal of scaling the business without adding more overhead. At a department level, it's some similarities, right? But they need to roll up. So as one of several departments, you want to do your part. And in this case, let's say it's a sales department. They're responsible for contributing the pipeline, making sure that there's a steady flow of business. Maybe after customers sign up, there's a target around customer satisfaction if you're a customer service department. If you're a financial department, you're looking at the return on investment. So should we invest in certain assets or certain campaigns, certain vendors? ROI is always a key measure. That one tends to go across, top to bottom. But really, again, kind of compartmentalizing for individual departments, they control their own budget. They can look at what return are they getting on particular investments. And then individually, individuals might have responsibility for a set of accounts or generating leads. They want to be very efficient in that. Are they using their tools effectively to generate the right leads, the most leads, leads that will ultimately convert? And so we want to come up with measures that support individuals in doing their job. Things like managing a campaign or managing a particular channel. Those are, oftentimes things that an individual has responsibility for, and yet they contribute to the greater good of the enterprise. Now, if we turn it on the side and look at the customer lifecycle, this framework adopted from Winning by Design really looks at that full lifecycle from original lead or prospect all the way through, advocate, loyal customer, repeat customer. And so what we want to do is identify the measures that support this full lifecycle. Starting on the left, you have your original identification of your ICP, your ideal client profile or customer profile. We want to see if they're engaging. Have we done things with advertising or other methods to bring them into the fold, make them aware of our products and services? And so there might be demos, there might be events, there might be other activities, that start to generate interest. And so we want to track those and see what kind of uptake we're getting. Then you move into sort of that lead qualification. And again, this is where it's important that there's a shared understanding of what leads are, what qualified leads are, and what the steps are to move leads to opportunities. So not only do you measure the volume of leads, but maybe the velocity as they move through the cycle. You want to, understand what steps are taking. And again, as you build your buying journey, you start to see patterns that tell you when somebody might be ready to buy. So then we look at actual conversion rate, things like the value of the opportunity. Can we drive, greater value? Can we look at the win-loss rate? Unfortunately, we don't always win every deal. So what are the characteristics that help us win? What are the things that maybe create a loss or a competitor eats our lunch? So again, these are sample metrics, but they're appropriate to the point in the customer life cycle that helps you measure effectiveness. As you move further right, now we have the customer on board. They're using the product. A good onboarding process, as many of us know, is key to setting expectations and ultimately customer success. So, looking for things like customer satisfaction scores or net promoter scores, those are very key to ensuring that customers are satisfied with the product or service and they don't become a churn risk. Now, undoubtedly, some customers churn, so we want to look at why does that happen? What are the keys to that happening, and how can we avoid it? There's also the recurring revenue, upsell, and revenue opportunity. So again, by tracking this, we can start to look for patterns where customer A bought product X and product Y. So now we can market product Y to other customers that have bought product X. And the idea here is to really start to look at how can we connect the dots on different measures, whether they're, speed oriented, value oriented, dollar and cents oriented, efficiency oriented, whatever it might be. There's key metrics that we can use that help drive that consistency.
So Thomas, I have a question here, and I think it's what we're not seeing here. And if I am maybe an everyday marketer, or if I'm someone who's really just kind of, like I said, embarking on this journey, I don't see things like email opens and clicks. I don't see, I'm not seeing some of those more kind of foundational metrics. And it's not to say that those don't have their place. I think they
Yep.
definitely do. So if you're starting to think about something like, looking at specific campaign or channel performance, and it totally makes sense. But can you talk a little bit about why, as a marketer, even if I am the marketer who is in the day-to-day, who is the one pushing the button, getting the campaigns out the door, why paying attention to something like the conversion rate or win-loss rate or even the upsell revenue opportunity is important?
Yeah, it's a good point, and I'm glad you pointed out, Susanna. That it's not to say that activity metrics are not important; they are, but I think they need to correlate with outcomes. So, if the outcome, for instance, of an email, if the goal is to call to action, right? It's to get someone to take an action, to fill out a form, to register for an event, or something like that. Obviously, they have to get the email in the first place. So, email deliveries, email opens, email clicks, and click throughs.
Right.
All of those things feed into awareness and education. So they're important. But again, they need to correlate with what the specific call to action is. And we know that call to action is a precursor to ultimately bringing them into become a qualified lead and an opportunity. And so, yes, we want to make sure that there's a mix of both activity and outcome-based measures. We just want to make sure that it's not just one, not just measures for measurement's sake or volume only type of measures.
Right.
Quite frankly, you'd much rather have fewer activities that lead to the same outcome, right? It's more efficient. So volume for volume's sake isn't necessarily right. It's the right kind of volume and the right kind of outcome that drives success here.
I will say, I think it also, we've talked about this in other webinars, but I think this is the type of stuff that also heavily influences the type of messaging that you're putting out there. So again, while it may not necessarily be directly focused on specific engagement, a lot of the metrics or the kind of measures that we are even thinking about, and some of the sample metrics that we see here, they also heavily influence the type of content that you want to put out. If there's certain upsell revenue opportunity, that may influence the type of product that you want to consider pushing or focusing on during a certain amount of time. Content doesn't stop, like I said, when the lead becomes qualified. And so a lot of this, continues to influence other marketing efforts beyond just that kind of channel engagement.
Yeah, we go a step further. We want to measure everything we can, and with technology, you're able to do that, and with AI, you're able to do even more of that. Just the sheer scale of data that you can consume and process has increased dramatically. So again, it's the distinction here is the scale of data, not so much the volume of activity, right?
That's right.
We prefer to have fewer activities that net better results. But yeah, I think and again, you can apply this at each stage of this customer life cycle. More and more, they are becoming integrated, and it's important that you have, full visibility across the life cycle to know how to make the best decisions.
Yeah.
So then if you look at time frames, we touched on this a little bit, but most enterprises do plan on an annual or quarterly basis. The idea there is to figure out at a high level where should we invest? We're making investments in headcount and technology and products. What's the right bet to make? And they do that based on what they see as trends in the marketplace or competitive positioning and so forth. So they establish a strategic plan. Well, then we want to be able to measure our performance against that. And so you're looking at monthly activity. Are we achieving the goals that we have on a per month basis, whether that's building pipeline whether it's actual sales conversions, whether it's efficiency goals. We want to measure that as we go. And then you take that down to a daily, weekly level and see, for a particular campaign or a particular set of activities, a particular event, how did that work? Can we measure it and tie it to the monthly goal and then ultimately the quarterly or annual goal? And so what we're trying to do is make sure that all of these measures from daily and weekly all the way to quarterly and annual are aligned and they correlate. Again, there may be different dimensions, but they have essentially the focus around the ultimate outcome for the enterprise. Now, these will be facilitated by good process, good technology, highly skilled and capable people. So it's important that you think about this holistically. It's not just throwing a dashboard up. The dashboard is the manifestation of all those other things coming together.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
All
some of
right,
these,
so
some of
go ahead,
these,
Tim.
I was just going to say some of these will like physically roll up to and aggregate up to the different levels, but not necessarily all of them. You won't necessarily have daily or weekly pieces that roll up to certain monthly measures. And not necessarily all of your monthly measures are going to roll up to your annual or quarterly, but a lot of them should and will. So it's like you said, it's clear to make sure that they are clearly integrated and clearly understood, which are physically rolling up, where a daily, weekly number becomes a end of the year number, and which are kind of separated from each other, that are only tracked on a monthly basis or only tracked at the annual or quarterly basis.
Yeah, that's a good point. Again, using the technology, we can measure lots of things. I think it's key to figure out which ones really are the drivers of business outcome. Okay, so one other dimension we want to bring into this is sort of where's the enterprise in terms of maturity. So to the extent that some folks on the call may not have a robust value measurement framework, they're on the left side here, they're early stage trying to sort out what do we need to measure? How do we do this? So you'll start with what I would describe as more basic measures, but things that would be available in your marketing tools, in your CRM or sales tools, on your website. So it's looking at things like sales calls, looking at marketing traffic, leads generated. Again, we're not saying generating leads is bad. What we want to do is make sure that the definition of a lead is good and it's aligned with marketing and sales. We want to look at things like conversion rate or the cost to convert, cost of acquisition. Those are things that, again, your current systems, if you have basic marketing and CRM systems, you're able to do. As you move into kind of what I've described as the adolescence phase, now you've got more experience, more alignment across the organization. You understand the drivers of success. And so now you're looking at, pipeline, you're actually looking at velocity, how fast do clients or customers move through the cycle, average deal size. So things that really are start to get more specific to actually high performance organizations that not only have growing revenue, but have higher profit. And so here, my technology needs to look at, account-based marketing. I want to get very focused at who I'm targeting, maybe have intent modeling where I'm looking at what are the key drivers of intent from my customer base, looking at, patterns of historical purchase or web behaviors or bundling of products and services. I also want to do things like multi-channel orchestration. So it's not just emails. Now it's omni-channel, it's a cross-channel, it's most relevant channel based on my definition of ICP. Excuse me. And so the technology actually supports a more robust set of measures. And then on the far right is, where we start to introduce a lot of automation and AI. So I might have, a customer data platform that allows me to enrich my data and do a lot of predictive modeling. I can really start to look at trends in the marketplace, competitive positioning. I can look at how the customer experience is impacting our churn rate, things like that. So it becomes even more robust where the tools are helping me be more effective in my delivery of customer experience. So again, there's a progression here. I think what we advocate is sort of a crawl, walk, run model. Now, if you're already crawling and you can move to walk, great. But if you're trying to run right out of the gate and you don't have some of the fundamentals in place, or frankly, the data in place to support it, it's going to be a really tough initiative.
So
So
do not boil the ocean.
do not boil the ocean. That's right. So, okay, so just to kind of quick recap, and then I'm going to let Tim actually show us some examples, but there's really the kind of core three dimensions, which is the customer life cycle or functional positioning, the organizational roles, top to bottom, from executive down to individual contributor, and then there's sort of the time frame dimension of daily, weekly, through monthly, through quarterly, and annual. And then it's just a matter of establishing or understanding where you're at in the maturity curve. So with that in mind, Tim, I think we're going to pass it to you and let you work through some examples.
So to try to put some of what we've discussed into practice, I built out a handful of sample dashboards or reports here. And what I'm going to do is walk through them and kind of talk about how various pieces of them relate back to the things that we've seen. There's no standard dashboard for every organization. Every organization is going to have different needs, different expectations, and different measures that are covered. Also, one dashboard isn't going to cover all of the dimensions that Thomas talked about. You're going to need multiple dashboards to convey different information at different points in time to different levels of the organization. So let me start out with an executive dashboard. This is obviously the type of a dashboard that's targeted towards your executives and generally should include high level metrics that Thomas discussed, things that are focused on things like market share or the total pipeline that you've got available to you, maybe high level campaign ROI. We don't care at this level about which campaigns are performing or not. We just need to know overall, how are your campaigns performing? What does our revenue look like? And even some of these things, like maybe it's sales by region. We want to understand which regions are performing and which aren't. As I go through this, I'll also show a couple of the capabilities of Power BI to be able to do custom reporting like this. For example, we can easily switch to show pipeline by region instead. And so what a dashboard like this might show you is, okay, we're performing okay in one region, but we have a great pipeline for that region coming up, right? So there's lots of different ways to look at data. The ability to use color to show positive or negative outcomes is great. And of course, these are all customizable. So if you don't like having an image, for example, in your dashboard, you can have plain backgrounds. You can change the overall design and layout of these dashboards to be any way that you want. A couple of other features that I'll show here. Maybe you want to be able to see these numbers by quarter, for example. If I choose only to see what we did in quarter 2, they're all dynamic and can be changed. Another thing that's here is this is a great place for some of these AI enhanced visualizations. In this case, this is just a simple AI summary that you can put into a Power BI dashboard, and it will give you some high level notes about what's working, what isn't working, what the data is actually telling you. And again, even this, because it's AI, is dynamic. So it's saying at 251,000, it's talking about the Northeast region. If I switch to show Q2 and Q3, or just to Q3, even those numbers update, right? So use technology to allow you to get to the information that you really need to see, especially when you're talking to different levels of the organization. We go back home. So that was an example of an executive dashboard, high-level metrics that have been rolled up through various departments in the organization. Let's go down to departmental or functional. Let's look at a sales dashboard, for example. In the sales dashboard, we're focused on totally different metrics. We want to understand things like the win rate of our opportunities. We want to understand how many opportunities we have, how many are open, how many are closed, what's the qualification rate of the leads that we're getting. And even down to the level of which reps are performing, which reps are closing their deals, and how much revenue are they generating, and what does their individual pipeline look like. Again, these are if we want to look at maybe an underperforming rep, we can drill into that to that particular rep's information and see how many opportunities, how many days to close, what their pipeline looks like, et cetera. So the interaction is important on these dashboards, but it, again, as Thomas mentioned, it requires capturing data at the right place, at the right time, with the right fidelity to allow you to see these trends over time, for example, or to be able to look at a point in time and see how performance was.
So I wanted to call
Sure.
something out here, Tim, in that, we've obviously titled this sales dashboard, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's just for a sales leader or a BDM,
Correct.
right? And a good example of that is the slicer, or one of the filters that you see on the right around campaign. So if I, as a marketer, and yes, I'm going to be looking at certain engagement at a channel or a specific campaign level, but I also want to see the impact that that is having downstream, right? So I want to be able to see how many opportunities can I ultimately attribute directly to a given campaign. I want to be able to understand the win rate. So again, we're talking about the business impact that those marketing efforts are being attributed to, as opposed to just focused on specific channel engagement, right? So I think this is a really good example of how, while this may be focused on a particular function, so in this case, opportunity conversion, it is still tailored to help both sales and, in this case, marketing, so that you're able to really see the attribution throughout the entire cycle.
Great point. Go back home. So that was, as we said, a sales focused but not exclusive dashboard. We might be looking at marketing channels. So how are different channels performing? In this type of dashboard, we want to be able to see how different different campaigns are driving leads. We want to see what the different channels are doing. Are they trending up? Are they trending down, et cetera? We may want to, focus maybe on our website. How is it trending? What is it generating in terms of leads and opportunities and pipeline, et cetera? Same thing with campaigns. We may choose to look at the details of a particular campaign to see which channels it's driving and how our leads are passing through the qualification process. So we can see which campaigns essentially are performing better than others against certain measures. And of course, that one was showing the last 6 months. The executive dashboard was showing year to date. Your different dashboards, they need to be flexible enough to show the people who need to see data at the correct cadence of that data, whether that's year to date, whether it's quarterly, whether it's monthly, or whether it's dynamic. You have the ability to choose what sort of a view you want to be able to see those measures at. So we've looked at kind of sales and marketing as departments, but if we want to go down even a further level of specific campaign performance, we want more of a detailed report that is focused on a lot of that activity and trajectory type data. This is where the marketing team, the marketing managers specifically, are viewing the results of their campaigns, the investments they've made to promote different channels, to set up events, to do website awareness, etc. So this is where that activity data, how many emails did we send? How many were clicked? How many form submissions did we receive? And what did that do in terms of influencing our pipeline or the total opportunity value that we've won? And we can compare these, campaign to campaign. This is the very low level data that rolls up to our departmental data that rolls up eventually in one way or another to our executive data.
And so, Tim, I know what we're showing right now is within a given time range as an example, but part of that comparative analysis can be against previous periods or the like, right?
Correct. Yeah, this, showing some of the trends in these measures is helpful to see what we've done over the last 6 months, for example. But yes, you could easily do versus same period last year. You can do any of those year over year type metrics. All right, and then I've got one more dashboard example to show. This one's business KPIs. And what I've tried to do with this one is it's not necessarily executive level. It's business KPIs that are probably relevant to all the people in the organization. So it does include some of the lower level metrics, but it also includes some of the higher level metrics, things like market share, pipeline, but also customer satisfaction. Everybody wants to know, how are we doing as an organization? What's our customer satisfaction score? What about our customer lifetime value? We might be driving towards a higher average customer lifetime value, so that we know that more people are spending more money on products over a longer period of time. Also things like, maybe we're splitting the revenue that we're achieving by the different types of sales that we're making. Some are upsells, some are cross sells, some are bundling these products together. So it's interesting to see the mix of products or deal types that the salespeople are working with. So again, your dashboards are going to be unique to your business and to the different departments that exist in your business. But these are some examples of the types of metrics that you might see at different levels of the organization and throughout the customer life cycle that are going to be relevant to most businesses.
Awesome. Thanks for the walkthrough, Tim. So I know we only have a couple of minutes left. So Thomas, maybe I'll ask you one final question to round us out, which is, if this is square one, if you are just starting out, whether you are marketing operations, sales, whatever that looks like, what is the very first step? Something tells me it's not the dashboard.
Yeah, it's to say, wow, a lot of pressure here. I don't think it's the dashboard. I think it's really defining your unique value measurement framework. It really is looking at those dimensions that we shared and trying to map out, where you think you need to be measuring. I think if it's truly the first go round, you have to start at the top of the organization. What are the goals of the enterprise? Again, it's the default setting is typically things like revenue growth, but maybe there's some more specific objectives if you're moving into new markets, new geographies, things like that. But it's identifying what are sort of the key elements of success for the organization. Keep it simple. Start with high level measures, but then start to work your way down to, okay, how can individuals and individual departments influence those measures? If you're not the CEO and you're starting at the bottom, let's say, you're within a department, it's maybe looking at how, based on maybe some of the things you've seen here, how you can influence that top level impact on the organization, and establishing a few key measures. I think the key though is, put an outcome mindset on. It's really more about what's the goal you're trying to achieve versus the activity you're trying to do. To me, that's the key that's going to help you sort of arrive at success. So I don't, Susanna, that was a little more than a simple start point, but I think I'm not sure there's only one way to go. And it certainly
Fair
depends a
enough.
little bit on your role in the organization.
Fair enough. No, solid answer, just the same.
Yeah.
Well, look, I want to thank you both, Thomas and Tim, for joining today. I want to round out with just a few resources. We talk about value measurement, all things sales, marketing, service, all things customer engagement, really, over on our blog. So check it out. We also talk about some of the products and technology that we leverage to be able to support a lot of the strategy and process that we talked about today. So definitely check out the blog. Shameless plug, we also have some continuing education resources as well through our Knowledge Hub. Lots of course-based education and opportunity to actually meet one-on-one with SMEs about things like analytics and insights and beyond. And then finally, schedule some time with us. We are happy to offer a complimentary 30-minute session to get on your envisioning journey. If you'd like to start focused on reporting, we are absolutely able to do that. So wanted to put some of these resources up there for you. Thank you again for joining us today, and we hope to see you at the next webinar. See ya.
Thanks, everyone.